without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass this, and especially I'm excited as well to see it again, some of a demo of how this stuff actually looks in real life. Dinesh, I'm going to try to change presenters to you.
Okay.
To be able to take control.
Okay, just received it. Let me know if you're seeing a screen.
I do, but I'm the least important.
Okay. Well, you're the representative for everybody else here. So I'm going to assume that everybody else is able to see a screen here. So some agenda items that I'd like to go through. One is what is new in WebFOCUS 9 that you previously did not have, both as a functionality feature for developers. So what's the developer experience going to look like? And then also the consumption experience for business users. So I've kind of consolidated this into different categories. And then if you need to have a more deeper discussion into this, we'll have this conversation. This is something that we've been talking to our customers, and we've been giving them this idea of what is really different in WebFOCUS 9. And people in the audience, you might be in WebFOCUS version 8, version 7, whatnot. So if you are in that process or thinking about migrating from version 7 or 8 into WebFOCUS 9, what does that process look like? How do you kind of level set? How do you get a footprint analysis, and then move from one stage to another? Also, this is more from a total cost of ownership perspective. When I say cost, I'm really talking about ROI and what's the process look like? Where are my gotchas? What problems have other customers seen? It's kind of that perspective on the migration from older versions of WebFOCUS into the new versions. And then I also would like to talk about operational DSML use cases, data science, machine learning use cases. Again, like Tim mentioned, WebFOCUS has been integrating with data science and machine learning use cases for quite some time. But now I see this at an operational level. So what does that mean? How can you build models? How can you use that in your WebFOCUS applications? What does that workflow look like? I also have kind of a RACI matrix, so you'll know who does what, how much of actual data science skills are needed in your organization, how much of a real user tool is this, things like that. And then I'll have a final show and tell of one application that we are building natively in WebFOCUS 9. It is a work in progress, but I'd like the audience to see that, just for you to understand that WebFOCUS is not really your charts and graphs and tabular reports. It's a lot more than that. So I'll give you a little feel for that through an application. Then if you would like to discuss more of your use cases like that, we also had a separate webinar on application design. So we'll be glad to send you that as well. If you're starting to build an application, and if you're starting to build that in WebFOCUS, what is the kind of the mindset that what are the possibilities in terms of self-service applications, consolidated parameterized reports, or individual reports, or dashboard type applications? When do you use what kind of content? So that's in that webinar there. But if you'd like to discuss your use cases, we'll certainly do that today or later. Now on to the content here. 1 second. As I did that, I lost that. Sorry. I'm still getting used to this new interface. Okay. Hopefully you can still see my screen. WebFOCUS interactions. So what does a developer experience look like in terms of what's new in WebFOCUS? So your interaction with your objects, whether it's a container or a button or a control panel, all of this is created through what's now called the interactions panel. So a lot less coding, a lot less syntax changes, a lot less, actual code changes. It's just interacting with the objects. That's just made a lot easier. And now with Tim mentioned NLP, NLQ, natural language processing, natural language querying, you can ask simple questions. You can ask simple questions like, show me my sales by month. And if you, through your pre-built metadata, if you have data stored as sales, if you have your time period as months, it's going to immediately give you a response, a quick chart, a quick graph. But the only thing I'd like to keep in mind is that this is not a custom built application. So you can ask those questions. I still view that as a developer experience that can be transformed slowly into an application world. Now, if you want to consolidate your use cases and build an application through that, this is going to be a much easier mechanism. So from that sense, I see NLP and NLQ making progress in its web focus evolution. Now, there's also, Tim mentioned data migrator being part of your web focus ecosystem, which also adds to your developer experience. So data integration, ETL, profiling, a lot of the different things that were originally meant for data folks, not web focus developers, are now available for web focus developers. Well, you now have what you call the web focus designer data tab. Then that's where you kind of go in to prepare your data, extract your data. I still, again, from my perspective, I look at this as data required to build your applications. Not your, you're not going to sit down and build your data warehouse through this web focus platform. You're going to use your data, you're going to prepare your data, profile your data, understand your data a little bit before you can start to build the application. So you don't have to wait for the application to be built and then realize that you have a lot of nulls in one of the fields, rendering your chart meaningless. So that kind of preparation, that kind of readiness of data is just a lot better now. Now, with respect to designer changes, previously you had available functions like filtering, custom calculations, things like that. Now, what's even better in WebFocus 9 is, quick and easy joins, quick and easy unions. I mentioned profiling before. Profiling, I think, is a very, very powerful phenomenon that's added to WebFocus 9. So you can do all of that, and not just from one data source. You can, invoke multiple data source. For example, create joins between two different data sources, create unions between two different data sources, and have them be your source of record for the application that you're building. And then navigation also between. So, if you're starting with a blank canvas and you're building out your flow, duplicating containers, separating containers, combining containers, all of those have been made a lot easier. The next slide. WebFocus Maps. Maps is one of the significant difference from previous versions of WebFocus. Previous maps, again, if you're an S3 user, if you have maps in your applications, you've realized that maps really is just an extension of what you saw as a bar chart or a or line charts or other types of charts. You had one or two facts or one or two dimensions, and you're really mapping out that, and mostly with geolocations. What's now possible with WebFocus Maps is a single map experience that have multiple layers with different locations. Again, the common theme here is that you can have multiple data sources. That's basically enabled through your integration with data migrator. So you can have multiple data sources, you can have multiple geolocation fields, and that allows you to build layers inside of your map. Later on, I'm going to show you an example of what that can look like in real life, that can look like in your WebFocus application. So like I said, you can reference content, and you can do this from either the WebFocus Hub. I forgot to mention what WebFocus Hub was. WebFocus Hub is now kind of the landing zone from which you can go into in a lot of different directions. And you can go into your WebFocus visualization. You can go into your WebFocus designer framework. You can go into your client world. You can go into the repositories, WebFocus repositories. So a lot of different things you can do there. And with the maps, you can also build layer-based zooms. So for example, now, as if you're not doing one fact, one dimension, now you have 6 or 7 dimensions for that one fact. You can build zooms for specific layers, and you can bookmark them, you can housekeep them. So the entire map building exercise and the map consumption exercise is just significantly enhanced with WebFocus 9. Another thing is the instant insights. I mentioned the WebFocus Hub. You can now create that instant insights in the WebFocus Hub. We're learning more about this as we go along. But the one thing that we've seen with this is that field associations, at a field level, at a single column level, if you have multiple variables, for example, that could be redundant, that's predicting your output variable. It's just easier to block out the variables that are not necessary. And how can you do that? You can look at it. You can look at instant insights, automated insights. You can also kind of go and define what parameters you want to look at before you start building your application. So I look at this as preliminary relationship, understanding preliminary relationships. And if you're in the predictive use cases, you can make that your preliminary analysis before you start to go into more important variables. Essentially, model building also becomes easier, because once you now understand some variables are not necessary, then your model itself becomes a little bit different. Now, some other notable enhancements here. Time series models. So you can build time series models again with a very similar experience that I talked about earlier in the WebFOCUS hub or in the designer ecosystem. That may serve as your precursor to your predictive use cases. Again, we've also worked with customers where that has been their predictive use case directly. Compound documents. Again, compound documents has been there before, but now you can use WebFOCUS Designer to create like direct presentation materials. And if you have a template that you need to be shared on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, you can create those documents inside of WebFOCUS and then get them share ready. Unified search, another thing that has become better. It has been there always, or for a long time. So within your WebFOCUS client or reporting server, all you need to do is that one-time indexing with WebFOCUS hold files or other WebFOCUS mechanisms. Once you do that, once the data and the content has been indexed well, all other subsequent additions to the data will now be automatically indexed. So that's a very convenient feature. And then the one other thing I'd like to talk about is the in-document analytics. So I mean, again, in-document analytics has been a separate mode, so to say, earlier. So you had to go and look at it separately, and then you still had a lot of filters, a lot of chart types. You can go do your own analysis without having this affect the default published application. But now that experience is a little more intuitive and interactive, which means if it automatically gives you options for building using a different chart type, and then sorting differently, things like that. Now you don't need a separate mode to function, so which means that this is it's becoming more a user function and less of a developer function. Okay, now if you're in the process of, or you're thinking about migrating to WebFOCUS 9, what do you need to know? So this slide is meant to be a kind of a checklist of the things that you'd like to keep, good for you to keep in mind before you embark on the process of migration remediation. The good news is that if you've already gone through the rigmarole of moving from 7 into an 8 version, every subsequent move is easier. And TIBCO will tell you that, and that's been our experience working with our customers as well. But there are going to be changes from every version. So what do you really need to know? And a lot of this is geared towards application content, which means this is a good time for you to understand your existing content footprint. Some customers of ours make the mistake of thinking that this is a magic bullet solution, meaning okay, we do a quick remediation migration. In most cases, the actual act of version install is a really quick one, but then you also have to look at it from your footprint, your application standpoint. Also, some other things that you do well to keep in mind were your applications built by different sets of developers, which means did they conform to your existing standards for code build, or did they build it their own way? Did they have separate naming standards, things like that? And the more custom code, the more custom UI needs you had, the more custom code you brought in at the time your content was built, those are some things that makes the actual move from WebFOCUS 7 to 8 harder, and then 8 to 9 a little less harder. So if they were remediated once, most likely they're not going to need remediation again. That's something that you can keep in mind. So were they constructed using native tools, even if they are now legacy? I mean, as long as you've been using native WebFOCUS tools, the act of migration becomes a lot easier for you. And this is when you're in the path of, when you're in the process of moving to a new version of WebFOCUS. Today it's 9, tomorrow it might be 10, WebFOCUS 10, 10.1. Just saying, that is the time for that gives you a reset time frame. So you look at your content, look at what's not being used, or look at things that have been incrementally built. So and get rid of some of your bad habits that were part of your building experience. And then also say, listen to our application design content. Yeah, we also have an application design content, like I mentioned earlier, that gives you an idea of for building efficient applications. So I won't go through this process line by line, but the process of migration, the first step is for you to get an idea of what might go wrong, especially if your content was legacy built. TIBCO has an assessment tool that can help you understand baseline issues. If you can talk to your TIBCO AE about it, or you can talk to us about it, and we'll help you find the assessment tool that will tell you exactly at a 65-70% level the things that we know from our experience, the things that also in that tool for templated errors that are expected to go wrong. So you don't have to encounter failure and go fix it reactively. And then the remediate. So the next step in that process is remediate the issues. And most of the failures are going to happen in your FEX files and your HTML files. Once you understand these, there might be a few other additional issues, and most of your for you to test, it's better to test it at an application level. For example, if you have a big dashboard that has a lot of FEX files, a lot of HTML files, it's better to test them at an application level. And then WebFOCUS, in this instance, WebFOCUS 7 and 9, you're going to compare your specific output with specific parameters, then carry out your UAT test. So from a process standpoint, we have helped several customers go from earlier versions into the latest versions of WebFOCUS. This kind of gives you a structured way of thinking. If we need to have a more detailed conversation for your specific use case, we can certainly do that. Also a testing approach. So even testing here, it's more of a science. So we kind of boiled it down into the different types of reports, dashboards, and guided ad hocs, and parameterized reports, reports with small data volume, reports with large data volume, report caster reports. So there's all different kinds of content here, and you have to test each one slightly differently. I'm not going to go through all that, but if you need to understand this a little bit more, glad to have a conversation with you for the sake of time. And some of the known remediation situations. So the good news, like I mentioned earlier, is that if you're moving from 8.2.07 to 9 and you've already been through the pain, good chance you might not have to do a lot of changes. But if you're in earlier versions, some of the syntax types, so the main types of remediations that are needed are around small syntax type changes, or drill down links, or paths, file paths, directory paths. Those are the most commonly occurring failures. So what we've done through our experiences is just capture the different types of problems that occur, and in tandem with the assessment tool that we talked about earlier, we've kind of captured an issue fix mechanism as well. And again, if we need to have a deeper conversation around it, we can certainly engage in that. I'll move into the data science machine learning integration. So what can you do now? So the biggest change with WebFOCUS 9 is a significantly better model development platform. So back then it's you build a model, and then you're going to call just the model in one of your WebFOCUS application reports, and then try to all other DSML is not seamless, so to say. now that model development itself, whether it's binary classification or your classical regression models or clustering models and a few other models here, you can build that in that model op area. And then if you need to explore data, this data prep element too. If you want to sample the data, understand your distribution, if you want to profile the data, you can certainly do that. And then use the WebFOCUS applications separately to incorporate the results of this. So this is a small RACI matrix that we've come up with. So AutoML is where you can complete your workflow. The workflow, so this one, this slide kind of details out who does what in terms of the data science operationalization. So completing the workflow, I still view that as a WebFOCUS developer activity. And then any prep modeling. So if you're evaluating a statistical model, that is the only, when you're comparing models and picking out a model that you think works for your data and your output variables, that is the pure data science activity that I see in this. Everything else is really a user activity, a consumption activity, or a business activity. So the ability to review the results of the model external to the WebFOCUS application before you even get to your WebFOCUS application. And in some cases, you might decide not to even get to the WebFOCUS application. So you can look at, for example, if you're a credit union and you want to recommend a next best product for your consumer base, for your members, then you're looking at all the different parameters that can tell you age group, how long he's been a member, potential potential salary, things like that can give you a next best product recommendation through the model that you build here. And then the use of the results in the WebFOCUS app, that is an application build exercise. So you quickly build out an application, and if you're building out an operational application, we built one for a credit union where, depending on who they're talking to or who the credit union was proactively approaching, they knew everything about the member itself, a 360 about the member, and with a quick next best product recommendation, they were able to cater their discussions around the model that was built. So essentially, WebFOCUS was playing a significant role in impromptu conversations. And then continuing to, so the model still has to be tweaked, changed, and reviewed over time. That can still be a business activity. The only thing, comparisons between different models is the only data science activity. Everything else has become really a WebFOCUS developer or a business activity. Now with that, I will I'll kind of show you an application that we've built in tandem with TIBCO using WebFOCUS, and we're in the process of still building it. I'll take a small pause here, and Tim, can somebody tell me if you're able to see the screen here?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, making sure. I've been talking for a while. Okay,
you're good.
Sounds good. Thank you. So this is an all-encompassing infographic with that we've that predicts weather patterns on the Earth based on solar activity, but based on interferences in the Earth's electromagnetic field. So these are all terms that I'm not the best at, but at the crux of this is a WebFOCUS application. So we only know everything that we need to know as a WebFOCUS application developer. So we built this out along with TIBCO for a space customer of ours. What I really want to point out here is that this is an entirely WebFOCUS 9 built application, native capabilities. So here is a ring chart that packs a lot of different information in one kind of piece, one kind of visualization. So I'd like to point your attention to a lot of these different rings. Each of those is really a chart. And for example, this is a K-index chart. K-index also relates to electromagnetic activity. So that predicts the weather patterns in the Earth. So it's doing this on a daily basis. So it says, for people that are consuming this, the need was that they need to understand this on a daily basis. It's not like you can give them, today minus 30 days. You have to give them every day. And you're able to do that through this ring chart. And you're also able to set up, or give them the same speed, temperature, kind of an all-encompassing, very heavy chart in one visualization. In addition to that, some of the other things I'd like to point out, like I said, it was an infographic, so kind of a control panel really. So they'd like to know some alerts here, 7-day alert status, what happened yesterday, what happened before, a quick summary here. And this is all, the business was defined by the organization, the requirement was defined by the organization. So we gave them a lot of words here that they wanted, and also sunspot observation. Sunspot observation is kind of the cool area inside of a sun that tells you what weather changes are going to happen in the upcoming days. So that's kind of a tabular chart here. And here I'd like to point out a map. So what I'd like to say from a WebFOCUS 9 perspective is that this is where you can do a lot of the layering. This particular chart does not have a lot of layering, it just has one layer. But I want to show you that you can build layers into this. This is the auroral oval. Again, auroral oval is an indicator of weather pattern changes. So what you're seeing here is that cool auroral oval. But if you build other layers into this, you can kind of see that colored chart. And you can have a legend into this for the different layers. I mentioned different zoom for each specific layer and whatnot. So yeah, so a lot of different capabilities within WebFOCUS 9 that it does not need to be one fact, one dimension into one map. It's a lot more than that now. With that, I will hand this back to you, Tim.
And one other quick word on that. I know I'm not as close to this as you guys are, but from my understanding that some of the data on this, if not, it will be, is streaming data, and some of that is data as a service from other organizations who are giving data. So a lot of things that you guys see here again are just becoming much more native to that. I mean, a lot of the stuff is not new to what you could have done before in WebFOCUS. It's just the ability to be able to do it is much more friendly and built into the application without having to do a lot of custom coding to make things work. So a lot of exciting stuff here. And I know this is just one snapshot of it, but a lot of other things going on too. So for the sake of time, I know we've got 5 minutes till. I want to make sure that everybody, please give us feedback. We'll be following up with people as well, just to kind of get your thoughts. Any suggestions you have, any areas that we kind of talked about and briefly kind of brushed over today that you guys want to go in deeper detail, we would love to hear that comments on that and let us know, especially if there's things that are relevant to what you guys are doing now. We'd love to hear that information. So, but look forward to talking again. It probably won't be till the new year. So everybody have a great holidays over the next month, and look forward to continuing our discussions over the next year. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you.